Hi, everybody. Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Frontline Excellence Life Science Manufacturing Forecast for 2025. My name is Natalia, and I'll be the moderator for today's session. And in today's webinar, we will revisit our predictions for 2024. We'll unpack how the year went compared to our predictions. We'll discuss our predictions for 2025, what emerging trends we think will shape the industry this year. And then we'll discuss how to navigate some of these shifts. So I'm excited to introduce our speakers. Michelle Vuolo currently leads quality at Tulip. Before joining Tulip, Michelle spent over 24 years in the biopharmaceutical and medical device industries in many different roles, ranging from QC laboratory, engineering technical support, quality assurance management, and computerized system compliance. Michelle has a strong understanding of the needs of the life science industry and is now motivated and driven to evolve stagnant ways of meeting compliance requirements, especially as it relates to the 4.0 world. And then we have Eddy Atkins. Eddy Atkins is a manufacturing nerd at heart. He started life as a manufacturing engineer, then moved to consulting and worked with some large global multinationals on their operational excellence transformation agendas. He's been with Tulip for over 5 years and has led teams in customer success in Tulip's library. He now works closely with our ecosystem alliance and technology partners on bringing joint impact to our customers. So without further ado, I'll hand the mic over to our speakers.
Hey everyone, great to have you all here and engaged. It was nice to see everyone sharing a bit their plans for the year. I think it feels like it's already getting well into January, so maybe a little bit late for some New Year's resolutions, but I think it's exciting to see all the adventures and stretch challenges that people have. So thanks for sharing those. I think, before we get started on actually sort of our predictions for manufacturing for 2025, Michelle and I want to revisit, score ourselves on how we did from last year, see whether we got them right or not. So I think for those of you that joined last year, you may recognize these or not. But I think let's give ourselves some scores here then. So I think I've got a little pen that I can play with. So I think let's start off with new technologies will empower manufacturers to work smarter. So hopefully I think we'll give ourselves a pretty good tick on that. I think lots of great examples of how our customers have been deploying Tulip specifically, but many other technologies to actually achieve value. And I think something I've really been excited about is the more and more impact focus. And for me, actually connects a lot to the second one as well. So I'm going to sort of tick both of these, connect them together. I think what I've seen a lot of this last year, and we'll share some more examples in a second, is really taking that, bringing the human centricness together along with the technology to actually deliver impact. If maybe we move on to, we talked about IoT adoption, bringing data to the forefront with previously undiscovered insights. I think, maybe. I think we sort of question ourselves a little bit on this one. We're starting to see a lot more connectivity of devices, but really is that what's driving the impact? And I think we see this last one, or second one here, we're going to give ourselves a question mark for. There'll be an accelerated shift from simple historian data to context-rich data in the cloud. So and I think we start to see this. We see customers this year talking about they're using data as a product and using those human-centric applications as data solutions. So I think definitely. And then finally on to generative AI. Michelle, do you have anything to add here? I'm kind of going to might start with a tick and a cross, but let's see what you have to say.
Yeah, I think there's plenty to talk about in generative AI, and I'm sure there's definitely an entire webinar we could talk about that, but we'll get into some discussion a little bit about kind of maybe where we stand on that and why there's a checkbox and a question mark. So yeah, let's dive into a couple more, a little bit of detail, not just saying we did great, but give you some background as to why we think so. So this quote was taken from CTO of Eris. This talks about the representing the fusion between human intelligence and technology. So this is really a combination of those first two, in my opinion. Whether we call it 4.0 or 5.0 is not the important point here. These are just sort of terms that are oftentimes associated with, in the 4.0 world, like the technologies that enabled a lot more of the connectivity and data sharing. And 5.0 is sort of a newer term that folks are applying to that fusion between humans and technology. And so I think people have started to adopt these new technologies, which is why we are kind of, giving ourselves a checkbox or a pat on the back for a prediction from last year. But also these human-centric technologies, I'm not quite sure we're there yet. Like I said, I think people are starting to talk about it. You're going to hear 5.0 probably more and more often. But more importantly, just to understand the distinction between maybe a human-centric and non-human-centric approaches. Previously, I think technologies were put in place to get efficiencies, which I think, is interesting. And I think we were able to achieve that in, I would say, the past decade or so. But as we move forward into really taking advantage of the abilities of these new technologies, a human-centric approach is really about augmenting the operators in a way to get more efficiencies, really. And so it's an interesting sort of paradigm shift. Instead of just expecting these efficiency gains in the production because you've adopted technologies, it's really about focusing on how we can bring those technologies to enable our operators to do better, quicker, faster, smarter jobs. So it's kind of a mixed bag, but I would say these technologies are definitely on the upswing of adoption here. So Eddy, I know you have a lot to talk about on the context-rich data and IoT, and what are your thoughts on that prediction?
Yeah, maybe to before we move on to here, I think the human side of the technology is really important. But how we've been thinking about this year about getting the data in a way that it actually can be used in a global infrastructure. And we talked about the trade-off between more locked-in historians and actually bringing data to the cloud so that it can be analyzed. And I think this year we've seen the UNS has been a very common topic that we've heard a lot about, starting to, I think, actually be realized in how people actually think and deploy the technology. So this idea of data becoming a product, I think not boiling the ocean on collecting everything and just collecting machines for machine's sake, but actually taking the data that you need to solve a problem, creating a quality data product that then can be used by the rest of the organization. So I don't think it's something that we've really seen a playbook, a very clear one size fits all out there yet, but definitely I think starting to structure, and as people deploy these types of more human-based applications alongside connecting the equipment that's around them, they get fuller, more context-rich data sets that they can start to use for AI and ML and driving optimization across the production. So I think moving on to the next, let's talk a bit about the Gen AI side and AI side. I think firstly, Michelle, this slide surprised me a lot. So I don't know what your experience is, but I know we hear lots of stories, but I mean, as I walk the shop floor in most of the plants I visit, I mean, I've done less manufacturing in pharma this year than I probably have done before, but still haven't really seen it in earnest at the front line. I think compared to how our software engineers, when they in GitHub Copilot all the time using AI. So I think maybe what are you seeing? Is this fitting what you see, or how do the use cases fall?
Yeah. Well, I'm surprised. You're surprised because these numbers are higher or lower than what you would?
Yeah, higher. I'm surprised how many 10% of more than 10% of pharma manufacturing is operating at scale with AI. I mean,
yeah.
It's quite a big 1 in 10 operators. For me, that's 1 in 10 operators on the floor are using AI. I think maybe I'm interpreting it slightly wrong, but yeah, that's why. Maybe my vision of what could be is maybe too big. I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that point. wholeheartedly, for sure. I think, I go to a lot of conferences. What I'm seeing is a lot of people starting to talk about and demonstrate and show their use cases, like where they are using AI, and it's not on the shop floor. I haven't seen much of that. I really haven't. Like, to your point, it's like operating at scale, maybe not, but like definitely experimenting with it. Like, that number does not surprise me. Even starting to incorporate generative AI maybe into certain workflows, but it's usually, in my opinion, I've seen it in the back office, supporting like initial sort of usage of, providing like first answers and trending for quality events or things like that are much more sort of like back office such. But I haven't really seen much happening on the shop floor, and even in, I would say, R&D. I think a lot of the regulations or documents, guidances, and draft for comment documents that are coming out with both FDA and EMA and just regulations from across the globe are starting to push the usage, but it is more in like the R&D space and in development. But yeah, I would agree. Operating at scale, I was surprised by this.
Yeah, I think what I saw lots of quick initial use cases come out, like maybe as you talked about, the being able to talk to a data set of issues that you have to quickly get a recommendation of how to proceed based on what's happened in the past, but not yet seeing like fully AI in the loop in a scale that I think we'd really like. But yeah, maybe this is a time to move on.
So this, I don't know if you've all seen it. Maybe yes, maybe not. But this red line here sort of illustrates this plateau, or this productivity peak and curve and all this kind of stuff. I'll explain in a second. I just want to make sure everybody sees the polling question. I'd like to see where you think you might be in your journey here with AI. But basically, what this red curve demonstrates is basically, last year, or I would say probably the end of 23 maybe, is where generative AI or ChatGPT, maybe the third version, whenever it came out, and lots of people were talking about it. All of a sudden, like everybody flocked to it, try to figure out what this thing is. And this is what you see is called the peak of inflated expectations, where everybody's like, ooh, what's that? It's exciting, hot new thing. Over time, though, and I think, probably because this technology was good, but not awesome. People started talking about hallucinations and things like that. And this is where the usage or adoption sort of drops off quickly, right? It's sort of that trough of disillusionment. And then over time, as these technologies get better, we start to see productivity gains. And then, this is where over time, again, this plateau of productivity is really more demonstrated. So I'm seeing peak inflated expectations, technology trigger. So people are at the very beginning of the curve. I'm surprised to see that. Slope of enlightenment. So it's really positive to hear like almost a third of you are talking about slope of enlightenment, because that's a very positive shift towards like, yes, we're actually getting productivity gains out of these technologies. You have anything to add there? Oh, actually, I think this is where we thought we were, is yes, on the slope of enlightenment. So this kind of tracks with actually tied with the technology trigger, which in my opinion is really interesting, right? People are either at that super very beginning or starting up that slope of enlightenment.
And I think we're starting to see some of the blockers get solved, and I think that's like, the basic use cases are in place. I think it's quite clear, starting to be a roadmap, quite clear of how we move forward to some real use cases. So it's quite exciting for 2025.
Awesome. I think it's time to get into.
Let's get into 2025. This is good. Right, now let's start looking forward. So I think we got five here for 2025. We'll go through them one by one. Starting at the first one, this is something that's like pretty close to my heart. And we say here, manufacturers will adopt continuous transformation mindsets to remain resilient. I think maybe manufacturers will continue to adopt might have been a better statement here, or I could even go as far to say digital transformation is dead, if we want to be really broad with our statement. I think what we're trying to get, what we're getting at here is that this state we've been in of digital transformation is a very big thing. It's a big step change thing. But in our minds, like when I was working on the shop floor, like what I wanted to do was try and make a small improvement every day to change how we would work. And when the years I've been as a consultant working on operational excellence, that's what we did with businesses. It was, how can we help them make many small improvements that add up to some sort of big change? I think traditionally that's been paper-based, like we've relied on paper to make those changes because it's easy and it's quick. And then digital technology came along and it became a big thing that we needed to do. We needed to make this big step change transformation. And I think now technology is catching up. It's becoming a toolkit that we can actually use, and we don't need to have this big thing of technology transformation. We can just do a sort of continuous and use the sort of the toolkit that we have to make many small improvements. And allows us as manufacturers, as people that need to get product out of the door safely to high quality, allow us to continue to stay ahead of the curve and continue to improve. And this way, I think in life science, not only is obviously just the actual delivery of the technology itself, but actually the validation as well. And Michelle, I think you always share with me how that's getting more and more agile and enabled here. So maybe you have a couple of words to say about the validation side.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, I think this goes along the lines of another topic we'll talk about later, but the composability. But I think this continuous transformation, we are looking for technologies that enable us to be agile, right? I think that's the point that Eddy's trying to get to. And because of that, a part of agility is this continuous thing is being able to adopt new things and continuously evolve. And so validation is starting to become thought of something that's more continuous and something that we can do sort of in real time. So this is really exciting. And we'll talk a little bit probably more about this from the composable perspective later on, just to plant a seed for you now. But, I also like to add, sorry, just one thing, and I'll hand back is like this continuous improvement or continuous transformation. It's sort of, we also have to talk about our people too, right? Like we don't want to just kind of focus on the technology. That would be a miss. I think of transformation under the guise of Pharma 4.0, which is a baseline guide that was put out by ISPE, but there's an operating model in there that describes also the cultural differences and challenges that you need to kind of actively manage, as well as the upskilling and resources. And we want to also do these things in a continuous way as well.
Yeah. And I think some of these things seem like big things, like, oh, we've got to do this now, this big new validation way of working. We've got to deploy this big new technology. But also I think the learning, if you take the learning as a continuous learning journey, a continuous transformation, it becomes easier to take bit by bit versus having to try and digest the whole of this new thing that's coming at you. And I think this is a good mindset to take forward for 2025, especially as we've already had a lot coming from the new US president around threatening with tariffs and like how that's going to change the global environment, and I think it's going to impact all of us down the line. So yeah, a lot of changes this year, especially the things that we continuously have to deal with as the workforce is shifting and potential demand changes. So yeah, I think a really, really important mindset change, but also the technology is there to really allow us to do it well, and the technology and the processes.
Yeah, Eddy, before we move on, I just want to capitalize on a quote that you said. I think we were talking the other day and you said, continuous improvement is easier than transformation. So that's quote Eddy Atkins, if anybody wants to use that. But I think it's pretty profound because it actually is, right? Like, I think the point here is the smaller step changes, and if you're doing this on a continuous basis is easier than transforming, right? Transformation and first big change. So doing it sort of in a continuous manner and continuously, it kind of will help. I think that changing that mindset towards that is helpful.
Yeah. I would agree with that quote, Michelle, of course.
Yeah, it resembles you. Cool. Yeah. So the next one, your out-of-the-box point solution will become likely obsolete. What do we mean by that? I think this is really an interesting one. When we talk about out-of-the-box point solutions, we're talking about these solutions that were sort of built for a very specific need, right? So basically, it's a set of functionality that's really fit for to solve a particular problem. And I think those are going to kind of become a little more obsolete as we move forward. May start transforming or transitioning over to, there's that word again, composable, but also more platform-based type tools that enable you to solve many problems, not at once, but together. So this is sort of just a visual of a shop floor, and we all know, we don't have to tell you, the challenges are vast and many, right, across the entire shop floor. So you can see, typically, I would say in these point type solutions, you're solving individual problems. What I do know, and having had a lot of experience in investigating and evaluating quality events and issues in the shop floor, that problems aren't usually isolated in that way. And so, nor should the data. And so instead of using these point solutions, we want to start moving towards things that are much more sort of open and enable you to kind of hit off more than one issue or problem at a time. Here's another visual that kind of, in my opinion, just kind of demonstrates this point a little bit more. On the left-hand side, we're used to seeing, very specific solutions for very specific problems. This is not necessarily how problems work, right? And oftentimes they are very intricate and interrelate. And, a production visibility problem probably might have something to do with also your warehouse management solution, or maybe your ERP, or I don't know, maybe somebody's training is not up to date and they weren't aware of a particular transfer process or something like that. The idea here is we want to start looking at solutions to solve our problems in much more an integrated way. So these bubbles are intended to kind of show that, right? Like that, a quality assembly problem could have a problem, associated with an in-process control problem or the like. So I guess the point here is that problems are not standalone. And so we want to make sure that our data to enable this evaluation in a more holistic, more ecosystem type way is enabled.
And Michelle, maybe just to add here, like an example with a customer I'm working with at the moment is they have point solutions, and these are not old point solutions. These are modern SaaS point solutions with an API. But because the actual functionality of those is so locked in, they're struggling to achieve filling in the gaps. They're having to do lots of additional building, additional custom building, and starting to think about how can they fill those gaps in, and looking for a platform to actually be able to not have to do everything from a code, but actually a platform that will allow them to turn those SaaS solutions into their actual solutions.
Yeah, I would call that data gymnastics.
Yeah, data gymnastics, exactly. And I mean, yeah, exactly. So I think it's a interesting. I'll talk more in a minute about how we can think about like the openness of a platform and an ecosystem to actually make this work.
Yeah, and I think this, you could talk to this or I. It's not either way. The point here is that these solutions are, like, again, they're interconnected, and adopting this sort of more platform approach enables you to take data from, maybe somebody mentioned in the comments about, can IoT be included in the connected apps? I think that is the enabler here, is enabling sort of your IT and OT to talk together, right? Like your information systems, can interact through what's happening on the shop floor, right? Through like a platform type solution.
Yeah, exactly. I think the IoT is sensor data coming from the machines, data coming from devices. The actual solutions that we map here, like may include some sensor data, may include or may need some device data, but may also need some information from the ERP. And the electronic batch record solution may actually, or likely would actually need to access the training solution to be able to get the verification that the person doing the process is able to do it, for example. So it's about having, I think Michael mentions there, like solutions that are able to connect and work together to achieve this type of open platform and be able to do it easily and scalably.
Just one last thing to add, like it's almost kind of a side benefit, but one that should be highlighted because, we are talking about humans here, but also the adaptability of this type of solution rather than having people having to learn and update individual point solutions for every problem we're trying to solve. Just, again, we're talking about upskilling and getting our operators more in tuned with the data that they need. This sort of more platform type solution is helpful in that way as well.
Okay, so let's move on to our third solution. So this is open ecosystems were a prerequisite for adopting future technologies, and I think this really fits, Michelle, very closely with the last one. It's like the piece, the kind of key concept that allows the previous one to really work and have a platform solution. So for us, we're talking about an open ecosystem, which means that the technologies are able to work together. They're not locked down, but it's also more than just having an API. It's about being able to have data that's accessible and transportable, and like the ability to be able to sort of use all or part of a solution and augment two solutions together. Like we hear about models like the UNS, which is a way of structuring and organizing data to get powerful, like your real-time updates and be able to have a single sources of truth for data and not doing lots of re-replication of data sets. I think very powerful for creating these agile environments. And it just allows you as an operator to take and plug and use the building blocks that you need. Like we already heard in the last 24 hours, there's a new Gen AI model on the block out there. We can't go too much further without using that. Like maybe we probably don't want to be using that one in our frontline life science critical process today, but these new models will come along, new solutions that may be cheaper, maybe more effective. And the open ecosystem allows you to plug and play those different parts so that you're always able to use the best technologies out there to achieve the goal that you want. And I think this is being replicated across not just manufacturing, but across many sectors about how the open ecosystem is going to be critical to actually enabling harnessing the powers of AI. Like you see the quote from the Salesforce survey on the left-hand side. But I think like what is really important is about collecting the right data. You don't have to collect all of the data. It's not about boiling the ocean, but collecting the data that you need. And that's not just plugging in machines and streaming those machine data to the cloud in the UNS. It's also some of maybe the other, like the contextual data that's actually coming from the humans that's more valuable. Organizing it. So you're building, I talked about building a product around your data. Maybe you want to have almost someone that orchestrates and organizes that data so that almost it's available and accessible by anyone in the organization to use in their work. And then some sort of process to actually activate it and make sure that it's being used to drive impact, and whether that's some analysis that's happening at the supply chain from the manufacturing data, or a model on yield optimization, but then actually what do you do with that information? How do you change, say, the schedule in the front line? How do you bring back those new settings from that yield model to the front line so that the machine settings get changed and updated so that new improved yield is actually achieved? So this is closing the loop, the activation part, like actually using those insights to do something valuable. And yeah, I think finally, to unlock the real world data potential, leaders must think strategically about how to collect, organize, and activate the data more effectively. And that will improve our decision-making process and patient outcomes. So I think this is relevant across, and definitely relevant in how we drive improvement in manufacturing and improve patient outcomes. Okay. Michelle, let's move back to the AI ones. Like, what do we think? Do we think we can make a good prediction this year for?
I mean, the data already points to it, right? Like, I think we're already starting to see that trend at the end of 2024, and we started off with that point already. So I do think that this is I feel pretty confident in this prediction. I think there's a lot of things that are happening that are enabling this to happen. The models have been out there for a while now. They're getting better over time. These models just get better with more training. Also because of that, or I should say maybe, I'm not sure cause or effect here, but also these models are starting to become used for specific reasons, right? So therefore the data sets or the training sets are going to be specific for a particular cause, therefore provide better results. And I think those things working together are really enabling these AI agents, if you will, or these agents to be sort of embedded in the solutions, or embedded into the flows of where they are being used. I think this further enables democratization of technology. No longer do you need a computer science degree or learned how to code software to enable you to kind of utilize and work with technologies and tools. But AI can also enable you to work smarter with those as well. So I think there's a lot happening in this space that is enabling sort of this uptick in the usage of AI throughout everything that we're doing. Like we said earlier, this is sort of a little bit of a mixed bag from 2024. That was because we saw it mostly sort of in the back office, and people are starting to use these technologies in cases where it's not maybe direct product quality or patient safety impact, lower risk areas. Therefore, I think we're going to start seeing a shift towards more operational use cases. Again, I think one of the earlier pickups is going to also be in R&D in those spaces to enable the quicker development of drug products and such. So, we have a few data points here from Deloitte. Their 2025 outlook in this industry is that they're saying, an 11% increase in value relative to revenue is going to happen over the next 5 years. I think that's huge when you start directly impacting the revenue of your product or company. Obviously it's a motivation and driver. With such a volatile market that we have these days, there is some uncertainty there. But what I've also heard in some of these, or read in some of these articles and reports, is that despite this volatility, there's a lot of optimism towards increasing gains and values in revenue in companies, probably through these efficiencies that newer technologies are going to provide us. Also, what I thought was interesting, which kind of goes to that bar graph slide from earlier that we saw. So nearly 60% of executives plan to increase generative AI investments across the value chain beyond initial pilot projects, and are beginning to realize substantial value, right? So what we saw just to remind you, in that bar graph on the right, the tall one was sort of that pilot phase, right? So I think what hopefully we'll start to see is a shift to the left towards towards at least full-scale deployment of these tools.
And Michelle, I think we're seeing it more and more that the cost, whether it's cost to run these models, is coming down. I think we saw the announcement, big announcement yesterday. You mentioned that again, but there's others, many others that are working on ways of how do they run these models on at lower cost of training, but then also from a security and IP perspective, how do you make the models better? You give the models, you train them on more specific data sets. So if you're wanting to use them in manufacturing and you're wanting them to understand the SOPs of the machines or the machine manuals, you need to train them on those SOPs and those manuals or the data sets that you want them to use. And maybe you don't want to share those data sets and share that critical information. So there's been developments on model training, being able to encrypt those insights so they're not actually getting embedded and you can't infer them back from the model. So lots of interesting developments there that I think will allow for more specific, more trained models to build. So actually the value of the solutions will go up and the costs will start coming down. And I think these 60% of executives are probably on the right path to adding a lot more than the 11% in revenue. I think there'll be a lot of efficiency improvements as well.
Yeah. So I think this kind of leads us into our last prediction for this year, and there's the word composability.
So let's just share it. So I think this, our vision, or what we're really seeing, is that the industry is moving towards composable solutions, and that's kind of really the outcome of what we've sort of talked about in the last 4 points, like a composable architecture. So it's got open APIs, it's modular, you can build with it, but also the actual act of composability, which is the definition here is coming from Gartner, which is being able to compose with no code, building blocks, but then also to be able to iteratively roll out solutions as well. And like for us, we see you need both of these. You need the architecture and you need that ability to, like, the toolkit to then allow you to compose. We probably add one more in here for life science, which is being able to actually do the validation in this sort of more composable, agile way as well, which we believe fits the same bill. So we really see like this composable platform, open ecosystem, replacing these bespoke systems. This you're no longer having to build the whole technology stack to deploy a solution. Like the platform is managing a lot of that for you. That's the virtualization. You're not having to stand up a server to run an application. Like that's being handled for you. The same if you're doing, like if you're running a Snowflake, for example, to do your data analytics, you're not having to manage all the infrastructure to actually run those data warehouse. It's being managed for you, and you'll just be able to do your analytics on your data. And we see that, these are the types of platforms that are going to be like working together to deliver a lot of value. And these, if we think about the front line as well, a solution will be composed by the person that's closest to the front line, bringing the machine, the frontline operator, and the AI agent together to give you a solution that's really going to fit the bill and fit the needs of the operation. And we see this from Gartner predictions, like by 2025, at least 25% of the manufacturing applications will be composable architecture. And I think that's up from 2% in 2022. So these, we see exactly this trend with the customers that we're working with, that they're able to solve many more challenges and problems by taking a composable act to that solution. And I think this is a really, really kind of visionary quote from December from Niels Erik Andersen. So this is talking about the connected frontline worker and Gen AI, and this idea of a human everything interface. He's calling it a HXI, and he's saying that the HXI it's a software application that combines like what you would know, the HMI that kind of stuck to the machine, and the connected frontline worker software that you've heard, and puts it together, turbocharges it, and it becomes an augmented solution. He's saying here with a chat interface and in the background an agentic AI. So I think a really vision for the ideal state for, or maybe the tools that we want to give to our frontline workers, our operators, and ties together, I think, a lot of what we've talked about in the first 4 points. But this is not that far away from being it's not some future reality. I think we're seeing this, and we have many examples in labs where these composable solutions are coming together, built on a platform. The HMI, so you see here on the right hand side, and it's a Sartorius machine. With the HMI is now a composed Tulip application, connecting to the machine, working as as the HMI for running the application, but also the work instruction and the connected application for the operator. I think adding in there some Copilot and AI elements, we don't get that far away from what Niels was describing. And this type of composable solution can be applied, I think, to any 3-letter acronym. We're seeing our customers apply it to QMS or quality management systems, to CMMS, to maintenance systems. And I think there's WMS, and we can now have a game of TLC ping pong, Michelle, to wrap up the day if no one has any questions, but you know where we're going. So I think, exciting times, and looking forward to 2025.
Yeah, so looking forward to talking about this next year at this time and checking all the boxes, hopefully. But so yeah, we talked about 5 different points here this year, and like again, just I would say pay attention. These are terms that are going to be out there. They, we should look for ways to adopt these principles and technologies. So I do want to kind of leave us with maybe 3 points for just to kind of practically say, okay, what do we do from here? Like now that we know this, the first one is adopt composability. This is what we're talking about. This enables sort of like smaller bits of value over time. This also enables the continuous improvement we were talking about, just adopting sort of that approach. These are a couple of graphics that talk about, like in the Big Bang Theory of deploying computerized systems in the past, where, we would build out this perfect system. And, a year and a half down the road is finally when you get value out of this. And then it just sits there and nobody wants to touch it because they're afraid to kind of evolve and, disrupt the cart, versus something that's more composable, where you can do these pilots, you can implement changes. Validation, as we said, becomes something that's more sort of composable. You validate for that very specific thing, get it deployed, get some value, move on, sort of evolve, go broader, go bigger, go different use cases, whatever it needs. But the point is you're almost immediately getting value in this sort of more composable approach. This is important to adopt from a validation perspective, from, even just, I have to bring the human back in here, the operator at the center of this, helps with the adoption. You get your champions, you kind of build it back into your sites. And so change management also becomes, human people change management becomes something that's ingrained and integrated. The second one, just going to talk through these relatively quick. I do want to make sure I get some time for questions. Invest in data management. Eddy, you want to pull in some?
So I think, very, very quickly, this is going to serve as a foundation for the analytics, the AI, for closing the loop. So I think really thinking about the data you're collecting data that is that's contextualized, that's not just streaming them all the machine data, but also all of the other information that you have. So I think going to be it's important to think about, but going to be a critical lever for you for this year.
Yeah.
Maybe I can wrap up quickly on the AI. Like, there's a lot of unknowns out there, but we're starting to see a lot of solutions being citizen developer led and very easy and composable and safe. And I think there's have a look what's out there and see what is possible, what technologies it's possible to bring into your operations.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that something a little more tactical, tangible to anyone here is, what I have also seen is that people are starting to make the usage of AI as part of their goals and objectives. Like, how do I incorporate this technology to add value in my individual department or function, or even in my individual goals? So that is one way, tangibly, like at any level of the organization, you can start kind of trying to, motivating this change or shift into this area. Again, I just want to highlight one more time, just especially with this life sciences group, is that even the regulators are pushing these things. You have seen over the course of 2024, and even there was a more recent one in 2025 from FDA, but these documents are starting to come out. The most recent one is the considerations of AI to support regulatory decision-making for drugs and biological products. That is out for review and edit and comment in industry right now. Like, it just shows to me that even the regulators are trying to push these technologies so that we can get our efficiency gains and get products to market for the patients who need them the most. I think that is all we have today. I hope that there are awesome questions out there.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michelle and Eddy. With that, we'll kick off the Q&A. So first question coming in. Besides AI, what other types of new technology do you think will have a major impact on frontline operations in 2025?
I'm going to start with the easy answer there. I think just the simple no-code application development, especially in life sciences, like the variability of existing paper-based processes that are very individualized and tough to digitize. I think the no-code applications have a very powerful place to play, whether that's a logbook or an electronic batch record or a work instruction. So I think that's going to have a very strong place to play and actually collect a lot of critical data, contextual information that can be used for AI ML down the line. So
yeah,
maybe not quite besides AI ML, but a leader to it.
I just want to support what you said there because, just getting back to the humans, I keep bringing that back in, but like, I think these no-code platforms also enable the further democratization of these tools, which I think is absolutely important. Democratization, really, it might be a scary word for, I don't know, regulated industry, but I think what's value added here is it enables those folks that are closest to the problem, those folks that are used to being in the operational space to solve their own problems, or at the very minimum, be able to affect their change better by talking, with the folks that are going to help here. So I think that this is absolutely a technology, these no-code technologies are helpful in this way.
Yeah, that's a great point. Bringing it back to AI, another question coming through is, what do you think about implementing predictive maintenance use case so we can predict equipment failures and prevent breakdowns using AI?
So, I think there's some very good examples of AI predictive maintenance models, especially on rotating equipment that's like in you. You've got data, high volumes of data where you have failures. So you need that sort of historic data set where you can actually use it to build a model to predict. I'm seeing some trends in that area where around like models that are going to be able to maybe be used on some more simpler use cases. But I think it really depends on what the equipment is and what historical data set you have, or whether there's whether your vendor maybe has a existing model that you can use. So, hard one to answer. So people are having success. Some people are failing because they don't have the data sets.
Yeah, of course. And so another question coming in is, how have regulatory frameworks adapted to support these new technologies, and do they need to?
Yeah, that's a very interesting one, and I put these in sort of two buckets, like regulatory frameworks. Like there's regulations, right? Those things that are codified by law and required for folks to comply with. And then there's also sort of those supplemental guidances and also what becomes standard practice in industry and things that regulators sort of review for. And I think those are two different buckets on purpose, because I think generally regulations don't change very often, and for the most part can still be adopted. But it's those guidances and practices, accepted practices, that sometimes shift. And that's where these guidance documents are coming out. Like I highlighted a couple from FDA already, not only a whole bunch in 2024 and already one in 2025. Like we're not even a full month in and we've already gotten one from in 2025. Also across the globe, also in the EMA, I know that they're publishing a bunch of guidances as well. However, sort of on the other side of my mouth is I do know that like Annex 11, for example, was up for sort of comment recently because there's that word printed in there, like, for example, like that is a term that seems to be a little bit outdated. But also like things like documented information are things that can be adopted even in the digital world, right? It's just shifting that mindset from a documented piece of information is not necessarily a piece of paper, but rather, digital data. And so I think it's really just a shift on how we achieve compliance to the regulations in this digital world, which is shifting and changing. And we need to be bold. We need to change, right? Like these are those cultural shifts I mentioned early in the beginning of this conversation.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think there's just some cultural shifts. I mean, it's still the same end goal of compliance, but just how we're adapting to it. So the next question is, how might a composable validation approach work for cloud-based applications and services?
Yeah. So how much time do we have left? So I mean, I could probably host another whole webinar on this topic alone. I think the idea here is these composable solutions are basically sort of allowing on a platform level and even at a no code level to be able to kind of build out, sort of configure these solutions and to fit a very particular intended use or a very specific need, right? And so validation is about demonstrating fitness for intended use or control around that specific intended use. So that's why I talk about composable validation. If you are doing composable releases of your solutions, then you are validating that very specific area, getting your value and moving on to the next one. And so this is where this composable approach enables you to do that. I don't think cloud really makes much of a difference here. Most of our tools are cloud-based now, and that also enables that, that hyperconnectivity that we want to bring our data to the right people. But it's really more about the composable type solutions enabling you to do this. If you want more on that,
say that you're breaking the validation down to much smaller elements of the smaller pieces. Like of those Lego bricks that you've pulled together from the platform, you're validating just that bit for that intended use, and maybe there's another bit over here that you validated separately and separately. So when you want to make a change to this piece, the effort of reassessing, revalidating, if that's the right terminology, is actually lower and can be quicker to get it in place. But imagine it takes a big shift in the mindset from where we are, where folks are traditionally, I'd imagine.
It does, but so now that you're reminding me, like cloud-based solution means that your vendor is probably doing some of the work for you, right? Like they're hosting the solution, they're doing your backup and restore to make sure you have data security controls around that. Like there's a lot that the vendor is doing for you, and so in a cloud-based solution, they're probably most likely, at least Tulip is, providing you sort of that platform qualification documentation to support your validation as well. The idea with that in a composable type solution and a cloud vendor is providing you that documentation so that you can focus on that sort of more granular level, that what basically how you built those building blocks together to make sure it does meet your specific intended use.
And so I think with that, that's all the time we have for questions. So first off, thank you so much, Michelle and Eddy, for taking the time today. And thank you to everyone who attended this webinar. If you have any other questions directly about anything that was discussed during this webinar, please feel free to reach out to the Tulip team, and have a great remainder of your day. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.